Welcome to our second part on how a camera works, and this is in week 2 of the course, how to turn your snapshots into photographs. Now this part of the course, as I've warned you about, can be a little heady. Remember, you can always stick your camera on auto mode or program mode and let the camera do the thinking, but I really want you to be in charge of your camera, so I'm going to push you through this so that you can choose to set the settings that you want to get the pictures you want. So let's think of the camera as an oven. Isn't that kind of weird? The camera as an oven. Well, let's look at the oven. You need heat to cook. The hotter the oven, the faster the cooking. The longer you leave the things in the oven, the less heat you need. The lighter the food, like bread versus boned roast, the faster it cooks. Right? Well, the camera needs light to take a picture, just like the oven needs heat to cook. And the brighter the light, the faster you can take a picture, just like the hotter the oven, the faster things inside cook. And the longer you leave your exposure, the longer you leave your shutter open, which we'll talk about later, the less light you need to take a picture. Just like with the oven, the longer the cooking, the less heat you need. So for example, you can cook a roast at 275 for 2.5 hours or at 375 for 1.5 hours, right? So the longer the exposure, the longer you leave a little shutter open to let light in, the less light you need to actually take a picture. And finally, the faster the film, the less light is needed for a picture. So with cooking, the lighter the food, like bread, doesn't take long to cook, versus bone, the faster it cooks. So with a camera, it has those little ISO settings that tell the camera, that affect how much light is needed to take a picture, and you can control it. More about that later. So the camera in totality, the iris, or the aperture, which is the little eye, little opening in the eye, and your camera, it usually says A on the little dial, lets the light in. So this is equivalent to the size of a door. You got a door, a little tiny door, or a big door. If you have a little tiny door, a little tiny window, a little bit of light lets in, but if you have a big bay window or a big door, lots of light's going to come in, right? Number 2, the shutter setting, which is on some cameras S for shutter, on other cameras it's T for time. And that's how long you leave the door open or the window shades open to let the light in, or the longer you leave the stuff in the oven to cook. So the iris is the size of the hole, the shutter is how long the hole is open to let light in. And then finally on your camera we have this ISO or ASA setting. These are international standards for light sensitivity. And your film in your camera, or the little disc that actually records the image, can be set low, like 100, or high, like 2,000, or 4,000, or 24,000, which my camera will do. The smaller the number, like 100, the more light that's needed to take a picture. So if you're outside in bright sun, we set the camera at 100 or 200, so you have nice, rich pictures. And if you're in a darkened room or in the forest, you might want to bump that ISO up to 200, 400, maybe 800 or 1,000. When I shoot inside the agricultural hall in Main Island musical events, I'm usually shooting around 1200 ISO. So anyway, that's the overview. In summary, the aperture is the eye of the camera. The size of the opening, the bigger the opening, the more light that gets in. Look over on your right-hand side. You've got f1.4 with a big circle, and on the right-hand side is f8 with a really tiny circle. So you see, the smaller the number, the more light that gets in. The bigger the number, the less light that gets in. The shutter is the blink of the camera, how long it lets light in. The longer it stays open, the more light that gets in. So you look over here on the right hand side, you see this little dial, which is the top of an old film camera. You got 1,000, 500, 250, 125, 60, 30, 15, 8, 4 and 2, oh, also 1, and then B. Do you know what the 1,000 stands for? If you have a camera set on 1000, you see the little orange marker here. So this camera is set on ISA, the speed of 1000. The shutter will stay open for 1/1000th of a second. So let's take a second, 101. Divide 101 into 1000 pieces. That's how quickly that camera takes a picture. That's a very short period of time. Thirdly, we have our ISO or ASA, and that tells you how sensitive your camera's film is to capturing light. The lower the number, the more light it needs. The higher the number, the less light it needs. And if you look at the bottom of the screen on the right-hand side, you see ISO 100. I could say ASA, but European and North Americans use different references. I think ISO is European and ASA I think is North American. It doesn't matter. It's set to 100. So that's a good setting for outdoor bright light. You're going to get nice high quality pictures, but you're going to need lots of light to do it. Alrighty now. So in summary, you know where the shutter speed is on this little display that might be on the back of your camera? Yep, 1 by 1/250th. You know what that means? If the camera was set to this setting, it means the picture will be taken in 1/25th of a second. That's the second chopped into 125 pieces, and that one piece is what is 1/25th of a second. That's how fast the picture will be taken. And the f-stop, which is the iris, you know where that is? Kind of does right beside it. f5.6. So that's kind of a mid-range. Many cameras have a range of 3.5 to f22. 5.6 is kind of a middle range. So 1/25th of a second with the iris open to 5.6. And then, of course, the ASA setting here is 100. You can see that at the end. So all these things interact together. Change the ISO, and it'll affect the f-stop and or the shutter speed. Change the f-stop, it'll affect the shutter speed, but not the ISO, unless it's on program or auto mode. And change the shutter speed, it'll check the f-stop and not the ISO unless it's on automatic mode. Now right below it you see the M sign. See the M underneath the 1/25th? That means this camera is set on manual mode. It means that the man with or the woman with this camera is controlling the shutter speed, the aperture, and the film speed. And right beside it you have this little scale from -2 to +2. If you're taking an average picture of an average subject, you want to fiddle with the buttons above, the shutter, the aperture, and normally we set the film speed in advance. We just muck with the aperture and the shutter. When you go to take your picture, your camera will show you this arrow will be pointing either right in the middle or be pointing way down around -2 or way up around +2. So what you do is you turn your camera on, have it on manual, frame your picture, and then you look at this scale. And if that little arrow is not dead center, then you have to change these settings to make it dead center. So if it's down here at -2, that means it's not getting enough light. So we either have to open up the f-stop or make the shutter stay open longer or change your ISO setting. And this is what we're going to practice in class, or what we did last week, and you missed out on it if you weren't there. Okay, so there you go. That's generally the summary of how these things work. But, you know, we're not done yet. We're going to go one more step. One, not a baby step like these little toes, one big step forward. And again, if you're getting freaked out, remember you can always put your camera on automatic mode. However, what happens in automatic mode? The computer decides what it will take to make a good picture, a properly exposed picture. So it decides, it looks outside, sees the light, says, okay, let's put this combination of ISO, and shutter speed and f-stop all together, and we'll take a good picture. The aperture or the lens opening is set by the computer. The shutter speed, how fast the picture is taken, is set by the computer. And the ISO, the speed of the film, is automatically adjusted. As long as you have it'll do it by itself. So here we have a picture of Lighthouse Park, kind of an average picture with average light in it, and it turns out to be a nicely exposed picture. That's what you get. Now you got a problem that when there isn't enough light, you're going to get camera shake. In other words, the picture will be blurred because the shutter has to stay open too long, and when the shutter stays open too long, the picture gets blurred. To prevent that, on auto or on program mode, the flash on your camera very often will pop up all by itself. The more expensive ones you have to do it yourself, but the cheaper ones it just says, "Hey bonehead, I don't think you're going to take a good picture because there's not enough light, so I'm going to throw the flash on for you," and that prevents camera shake. Now the trouble is, you get a picture like this, and from my point of view, this picture is not nice at all.